everybody, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is host of the Damage Report, our very own John Iadarola. What's going on, John?
I am so happy to be here. How's it going, Anna?
I'm happy that you're happy, and it's going as good as it could possibly go, considering the state of the country, where we're at with this election, just trying to keep things together. And TYT is also trying to keep things together through our fundraising effort. Just wanted to give you guys a quick reminder about that. You can donate to TYT to help keep us sustainable by going to tyt.com/go. Also, I just want to encourage everyone who maybe isn't able to contribute financially to the show. One other way that you can support us is obviously through sharing and liking this stream. When you do that, that actually gets more eyeballs on the show, and it really does help us out. So please do so. And I don't know, John, what should we do today? Should we do 90s dance music singing later in the show as a reward, or should we do Charlie appearances?
If Charlie wants to dance, he can, but I think you should definitely sing, and you should let me choose the song.
Fine, deal. Okay, so let's make the goal 2,000 likes and shares today.
Okay, and I'll be looking at the comments to see if there are any good suggestions for songs.
Okay, all right. Look, and there's a caveat. I need to at least know what the song is. So please, nothing obscure. I need to know the melody, and then I'll do it. I'll do it for sure.
Sounds good.
All right, well, let's get to our stories because there's a lot to get to today, including Donald Trump's latest lies about protesters. So, Donald Trump has latched onto divisive propaganda regarding civil unrest in the country, and he's using this as a campaign strategy. There's no question about it. Some of his disinformation honestly reminds me of the type of stuff you would hear from North Korea or any dictatorial regime that uses this type of disinformation to further divide and conquer. And one of the more recent examples was from Trump's visit to Kenosha yesterday, Kenosha, Wisconsin. He purported to be speaking to a shop owner who lost his store, I believe it was a camera store, because of the unrest, because of the so-called looters and the violence in Kenosha. But it turns out that the actual shop owner was unwilling, had no interest in being part of Trump's propaganda tour. And so Tom Graham, who actually owns this old camera shop, that was leveled in fires last Monday after protests broke out in Wisconsin, told the NBC affiliate in Milwaukee that he immediately refused when the White House called on Monday, asking if he would accompany the president on a tour that would showcase the leveled business. He said no. The shop owner's like, not into it. In fact, he was quoted as saying, I think everything he does, meaning I think everything Trump does, turns into a circus, and I just didn't want to be involved in it. When Graham said no, according to Talking Points memo, it appears that a former owner of the shop, John Rody III, who lavishly praised the president's efforts, was featured instead. Graham told the local NBC affiliate that he has been the shop owner of the century-old Rody's camera shop for the past 8 years after he purchased the shop from the Rody family. Now, keep in mind that the shop owner's last name is pronounced Rody. That's relevant because Donald Trump, he loves using people for his own political gain, doesn't even care to check what the name of the individual is or how you pronounce it. But without further ado, here is Trump on his Kenosha, Wisconsin visit, prancing around with someone who doesn't actually own the shop that he's talking about.
So this store was here 109 years, just about the oldest in the nation, doing what you did.
Oldest in the state, for sure.
It's fantastic. And we're going to help them a lot. I think we're going to help them a lot. Would you like to say something?
I just appreciate President Trump coming today. Everybody here does. We're so thankful that we got the federal troops in to help, because once they got here, things did calm down quite a bit. And our city police and sheriff and fire departments are awesome. They work harder than you can believe, 24/7.
That's true. These gentlemen did a fantastic job working with the federal government, and it was really great. And once we said, let's go, that was the end of it. Unfortunately, they had a few days when people wouldn't call us. They didn't want to have us come in. They just don't want us to come in, and then destruction is done. A day early, we would have saved your store.
Absolutely.
1 day early.
1 day early.
I just want to remind everyone that the federal government does not have the ability to just send in federal troops or federal officials in response to any type of unrest. The state needs to ask for it, right? So a common misrepresentation that you'll likely hear is that, the federal government took actions into their own hands and they wanted to help provide safety in these failing democratic states. Like, that's the narrative we keep hearing, but just understand how that system really works and how Trump literally does not have the ability to do that. So John, this is just one of the more recent lies that we heard from Trump in regard to the protesters. And unfortunately, this disinformation campaign is working.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the whole thing just makes me absolutely disgusted. Everything that has happened from the beginning in Kenosha, from the original shooting on to, if he really wanted to safeguard people's lives, he could tell his followers to not go where they don't live, to defend property that's not theirs and murder people while doing it. That would be helpful. And he actually does have the ability to do that. He can actually go and say that, but instead when asked about these individuals, he's incredibly defensive about them, as is all of right-wing media. Yeah, to bring out the guy that doesn't even presently own it and imply that he's gonna help him, like, he can't help him because it wasn't his business at the time, but he wouldn't help him anyway. Like, who is anybody gonna check in a month to see if he gave the guy money or something? He's not gonna do that. He doesn't pay his own bills, let alone someone else's bills. And he wants to help out the guy. He's standing 2 feet from him, not wearing a mask. How careless, how cruel. And all of it, of course, is to generate a Twitter video mashup of him visiting Kenosha, the entire thing. I mean, I know presidential visits have long been PR, but it's so directly just about that they're just trying to create something that they can tweet out later that day. And I'm sure it's already up.
I mean, look, one of the best examples of how Trump actually doesn't care about providing aid to these businesses and to these communities that he alleges have been absolutely devastated by these protesters is the fact that he has said that he'll veto any type of stimulus legislation that includes funding for state and local government. And so you're right, he never actually wants to put any resources or action behind what he alleges he cares about. He likes to use people and exploit people in vulnerable positions for his own political gain. And in this case, we're not even talking about someone who's in a vulnerable position. Again, this person, Rhodey, does not own that shop and hasn't owned that shop for 8 years. And I think that's relevant to keep in mind as you see more and more of Trump's propaganda disinformation campaign. One other example, by the way, has to do with Trump's comments regarding Portland and how he has basically tried to paint this picture of Portland on fire. It's just completely burnt to the ground. I mean, his exaggerations have become so bad that the firefighters in the area felt the need to refute what he says. So the fire department in Portland, Oregon is refuting claims from President Trump that the entire city is ablaze at the time amid growing protests. So Lieutenant Rich Chapman from the Portland Fire and Rescue released a statement saying, "We are not ablaze in Portland. There is a very isolated pocket of demonstrations that have involved fire, none of which has been substantial enough to need more than one fire engine." So, it's just important to know what the facts on the ground are. And, what the Trump campaign is trying to do is make people fearful of Black Lives Matter, to draw this false equivalency between BLM demonstrators and people who are looting or doing whatever. That activity is not indicative or illustrative of what BLM is out there doing at all, or what their message is. And what Trump is doing is very intentional. And the reason why I say it's working is because, as you'll see later in the show, Biden is now playing the role of defense, which is really, really frustrating because of Trump's disinformation campaign.
Exactly. And look, we can feel bad for the people who actually own businesses. I don't want anybody's livelihood being destroyed or whatever. And certainly old camera shops, how many could there possibly be anymore? Especially one that's been around that long. We can feel bad for that, but we can also call it out when he's clearly lying opportunistically about the state of Kenosha or Portland. I mean, he recently said that Portland has been on fire for decades, just the whole thing. And that's not, even in the past few months, it's a small area around the courthouse that has had protests, let alone fires, not the entire thing. And it's one thing when incumbents lie about the state of the country to imply that things are better. Like if they pretend, for instance, that a pandemic isn't happening or that the economy hasn't been destroyed. That's dishonest, that I don't like it. But it seems way scarier, way darker when they lie to imply things are worse. Like that there's more chaos, more violence, more fires. What sort of prospective government would do that? Like a democratic one, a representative one? No, they wouldn't do that. Only a really sick, dark, authoritarian government would pretend things are far worse and more apocalyptic than they are to get reelected. And that is clearly the path he's going down. And I, like you, I don't like that Biden seems to be stepping so eagerly into that trap. But yeah, this entire trip has been a farce, if a farce can be as scary as this.
Well, speaking of Trump's weird exaggerations, let's go ahead and move on to what he had to say about soup, because that made headlines recently. Trump went on a strange rant about weaponized soup and how it's allegedly being used as a tool by Black Lives Matter demonstrators. Let's take a look.
And then they have cans of soup. And they throw the cans of soup. That's better than a brick because you can't throw a brick, it's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right?
Yes, sir.
And then when they get caught, they say, no, this is soup for my family. They're so innocent. This is soup for my family. It's incredible. And you have people coming over with bags of soup, big bags of soup, and they lay it on the ground and the anarchists take it and they start throwing it at our cops, at our police. And if it hits you, that's worse than a brick because it's got force. It's the perfect size. It's like made perfect. And when they get caught, they say, no, this is just soup for my family. And then the media says, this is just soup. These people are very, very innocent. They're innocent people. These are just protesters. Isn't it wonderful to allow protesting? No, and by the way, the media knows it better than we do. They know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong with them.
Listen, I can't speak for the media in general, but I can definitely tell you that I didn't know that there was this epidemic of protesters using cans of soup as weapons. Now, the Portland Police Department did release some imagery of weapon.
Anna, wait. This is the first
that looked delicious.
About how dangerous soup is. You don't remember that old Campbell's jingle? It's nature's perfect weapon. You don't remember that? It was always on the radio. That does look delicious. I won't lie. That is some good looking soup.
Now look, I haven't seen any evidence of them using cans of soup, but to be fair, and I want to be clear again that people who do this stuff are not encouraged by BLM. This is not part of the movement. This is not a part of the demonstration. We have to stop allowing the right wing to run with that narrative because it's intentionally made to make people fearful of individuals demonstrating who are just demanding that their lives matter, okay? With that said though, there is evidence of some people throwing bottles and things like that. And so the Portland Police Department posted this image on Twitter. And in that image, you can see that there is a can of garbanzo beans. So maybe that is what Trump is referring to. Now, maybe Trump has never eaten a garbanzo bean. I don't think they use any of those ingredients in McDonald's meals. But what I do know is it's not soup. Anyway, just wanted to fact check and give you that distinction. Go ahead.
Well, that image there, if we could bring that back up, it's really interesting that first of all, White Claw, so widespread now, it's not just frat guys, it's anarchists as well. And also, I'm assuming they had to pose the other ingredients around that brick since nobody could lift a brick, according to Donald Trump.
My God.
Too heavy. It's like Thor's hammer. Who among us is qualified, has the spirit to lift a brick? I love what he admits for no reason that he couldn't pick up a brick. Jeez.
I know, it's so good. It's so good. Now, while he was scaremongering about soup, and I want to be clear that video was from a while ago. It was from July 31st. It was a White House meeting with the National Association of Police Organizations leadership. And so that's what he said a little over a month ago. And then you fast forward to what Trump had to say about Patriot Prayer members showing up to BLM demonstrations with paintball guns. Here's what he said about that.
I noticed you did not mention that your supporters were also in Portland this weekend, firing paintball guns at people, some form of pepper spray. So do you want to also take this chance to condemn what your supporters did?
Well, I understand they had large numbers of people that were supporters, but that was a peaceful protest. And paint is not, and paint is a defensive mechanism. Paint is not bullets. Your supporters, and they are your supporters indeed, shot a young gentleman who and killed him, not with paint, but with a bullet. And I think it's disgraceful. These people, they protested peacefully. They went in very peacefully. And I'll tell you what they're protesting. They're protesting when they turn on television or read whatever they may be reading, and they see a city like Chicago where 78 people were shot and 13 died, or a city like New York where the crime rate has gone through the roof, or a city like Portland where the entire city is ablaze all the time, and a mayor says we don't want any help from the federal government. When these people turn that on and they see that, they say, this is not our country. This is not our country. That was a peaceful protest, totally.
So, John, when it comes to soup, Trump would like you to simmer down. When it comes to paintball guns, as long as you're part of an armed militia group, then it's okay because it's not bullets.
Yeah, I mean, that footage is, but it doesn't matter. Like they could have been shooting flamethrowers off the side of that, and none of it's gonna matter. It's like Kayleigh McEnany the next day is gonna be like, oh my God, those were Trump fans and they're being violent. What have I done? What have I joined? No, that's not gonna happen. They could have run down 50 people and they would have blamed CNN for it. They already forgot about Kyle. They were just talking positively about Kyle a couple days ago. Charlie Kirk was doing it this morning. He murdered multiple people, but they're on. They don't care about that anymore. It's a defensive mechanism. Presumably, if you put the paint in a soup can, then it would be deadly. But as long as it's fired out of a rifle shape, then it's okay. It's all just so fake. It's so fake, and it's like purposefully weird to distract you from the very simple truth at the core. One of Trump's child soldiers went to a protest because he hated the ethnic minorities that were organizing it, and he went there to murder people, and he did it, and they're still defending him. That's it. That's the whole thing. And they're still encouraging that sort of thing literally every day. In that answer, he's saying, well, here's why they're going to the cities, because it's really bad. He's still encouraging them to do it.
So I want to read some member comments on this story, and our members help to keep our show sustainable. You can become a member and support TYT by going to tyt.com/join. Dickie McGazax says, Trump makes up information to make things appear worse than they are when it benefits him, and you're absolutely right about that. He exploits situations. In fact, he helps to make tensions in this country even worse, division in this country even worse. He exploits it for political gain. He actually benefits from the chaos because that's when he can do, I guess, his strongest messaging. And someone who likes Bernie Sanders also wrote in and says, I think Trump's advisors had to undergo a disinformation campaign about soup in order to get Trump to choose salad for just once in his life.
Oh my God!
It's just
It's a universal truth. Old guys love talking about soup. I don't know what it is. But inevitably, you either die young or live to talk about soup.
It's amazing. Anyway, look, it's a funny story, but when you really do take a step back and you think about the disinformation campaign and what it's doing to our country, it really does leave one in a stew. We got to take a break, and when we come back, we have other news to share with you, including Biden playing defense.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Welcome back to TYT, where I am hosting the show today with an individual who likes to consume beet juice. Very office-esque of you to like beet juice, John. Do you also farm beets?
If you watch enough of it, you eventually become a beet farmer. Yeah, I like juice, not in canned form. It's a bit dangerous. I feel risky even having it near me, but yeah, I do like it.
Okay, all right, well, let me go ahead and read. I'm gonna read one member comment and then I'm gonna read a bunch of super chat comments. Steve in real life has weighed in on what the reward should be, if you wanna call it that, based on how many shares we get on the stream. He says, viewers, members need to get to pick the song. I vote Return of the Mac.
That's a good one.
That's a fun song. It really is a fun song. I'll come back to member comments after the next break. For now, let me read some super chats. Lonely Soul says, Pink, get the party started. And Bunker Boy's a little punk. Absolutely. I Get Her 9, It Get Her 9 says, when he said Portland's been burning for years, you could tell someone had put on the Yule log. Whoa, we have 1,400 likes already. I want to start singing, but remember our goal is 2,000, okay? We're almost there, we're almost there. Okay, let me read the rest of that comment. Yule log video for him in his little presidential bedroom. And Treble Summer says, yeah, the guy who thinks exercising steals your life energy also believes people wouldn't be able to physically throw bricks. So he has to use, so they have to use Campbell's. I know, it's hilarious. Remember when he needed to use both hands to sip that glass of water? So, I mean,
imagine if it was chowder.
Yeah. Oh, he'd get creamed. Get it? By the chowder. Because it's chowder is creamy. Okay, let's move on to Biden. So, Donald Trump is good at one thing, and that one thing is spreading a simplistic disinformation campaign that scaremongers about violence and how Democrats like Biden would only create more violence if he were elected over Trump. Now, we all know that's complete and utter lies. We know that the country is experiencing civil unrest in multiple states because of Donald Trump, stoking tensions, pushing for more division in the country. This is Trump's America. And so you would think that the Biden camp would have a good response to this. Instead, he's playing defense, and he does so in the form of a new campaign ad. Let's take a look.
I want to make it absolutely clear. Rioting is not protesting. Looting is not protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple. And those who do it should be prosecuted. Fires are burning and we have a president who fans the flames. He can't stop the violence because for years he's fomented it. But his failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is. Violence will not bring change. It'll only bring destruction. It's wrong in every way. If I were president, my language would be less divisive. I'd be looking to lower the temperature in this country, not raise it. Donald Trump is determined to instill fear in America because Donald Trump adds fuel to every fire. This is not who we are. I believe we'll be guided by the words of Pope John Paul II, words drawn from the scriptures. Be not afraid.
So, John, I want to toss to you immediately and kind of get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I already did a video earlier about the speech that was drawn from. I like the video, the ad version of it more, because I feel like it more quickly turns to like, yeah, the protesters, the riots, they're all real bad. They should all be locked up or whatever. And it's Trump is the one that's making it worse by not giving in, by raising the temperature, all that stuff. I don't like the first part at all, but the faster the transition to the second, I at least think it's a little bit more effective. The actual speech is a little bit heavier on the, there's violence on both sides, totally unnecessarily falling into that. But this is going on while Donald Trump is president. He is not doing anything to make it better. And of course, even if he wasn't going to engage with the arguments about police reform in terms of dealing with the pandemic and the economic crisis, he's making everything worse. And so if Biden is going to focus on that, that's an okay strategy. And based on the polling that I've been seeing recently, I'm less worried than a lot of the prognostications last week about this becoming the main thing in the election. Still, there does not need to be all this focus on how everyone who gets even mildly angry at a protest is in some way comparable to people trying to run protesters over and spraying them with pepper spray and things like that.
Yeah, okay, so that was my biggest issue with it, right? I mean, the first part, it starts off with boom, looting is not protesting. And I think that it's a mistake to do that because the way that I would frame it is hit Trump immediately with, Trump is trying to equate looters with people who are simply demanding that their lives matter, right? We can't let him do that. In fact, why don't we focus on Trump completely ignoring warnings of right-wing terrorism in this country and then go to the facts because the facts exist. This country's been riddled with right-wing terrorist attacks it started earlier under the Obama administration. And when I say started, I mean increasing under the Obama administration. But Trump has encouraged it while also ignoring his own DHS officials who are like, hey, this is a big problem. We need to do something about right-wing extremism. So let me give you the latest example because an official who actually worked for DHS under Trump, someone who is a Republican, someone who voted for Trump in 2016, just recently decided to quit because she realized this guy doesn't care about the safety of Americans at all and completely ignored my warnings about right-wing extremists. A former top DHS security official who resigned in April says the Trump administration is creating the conditions for domestic extremism to flourish in the United States. Her name is Elizabeth Newman, and as I mentioned, she was not only a lifelong Republican, but she voted for Trump in 2016, supported him. Newman found herself stepping into the role of Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention. In that capacity, she was officially in charge of emerging threats and had identified violence perpetrated by right-wing extremists as a major one. In fact, she was quoted as saying, if you look at the people that have been arrested for protests, by and large, it's the Boogaloo movement or it's an association with QAnon. It's the right side of the spectrum. It is not Antifa. The threat of domestic terrorism is not from Antifa. It is from these right-wing movements. And Newman says that there has been no effort to combat this from Republicans. She says, if you had a very clear voice at the top from the president, from other senior leaders in the Republican Party denouncing this and warning conservatives that these groups are trying to recruit you based on things that might sound like a typical conservative belief. It would somewhat inoculate people from that recruitment and that radicalization. We have the president not only pretty much refusing to condemn, but throwing fuel on the fire, creating opportunities for more recruitment through his rhetoric. Donald Trump, through his actions, has made the country less safe. And you have people who previously supported him and worked for him screaming about this from the rooftops, and it's getting ignored. This is such good material for Biden to use in his ads. And look, he ended that ad with saying, don't be afraid. But what that communicated to me, I don't know what his intentions were there, but as someone who's just watching that ad, it's like, wait, do I need to be afraid of you? Why are you telling me not to be afraid? Right? You just have to be really precise in your language and don't put yourself in this position of defense politics. Like, hit Trump where it hurts. He's such a target-rich environment.
Yeah, and look, I think they will land on some of these things as a sort of necessary consequence of the fact that their campaign is going to generally be about Trump and not about Biden. And so, look, if you're talking about Trump enough, you're going to talk about the big things that are going on in the country, including the pandemic, economic crisis, and his response to the protests. So I think they're going to get to it. Some of these totally unnecessary stumbles along the way are incredibly frustrating, especially because I don't think, I'm very worried about what the run up to the election is going to look like. And I really want them to take it as seriously as possible. And there's so many ways already that we're not going in that direction. But yeah, they need to be very clear about who's actually behind the violence, because the right isn't going to condemn it because they don't actually care. The militia movement, the sovereign citizens, the Boogaloo Boys, they're gonna kill people, but they're not generally gonna kill Republican politicians, so Republican politicians don't really give a damn about it. Now they will and do kill cops, which is why it's always astounding to me that cops are so defensive about these movements. They ambush and kill cops on a regular basis. But generally, regular people that are gonna die are gonna be leftists or centrists at protests. They're not gonna be right wingers. So Donald Trump doesn't feel at all at risk when he tells his supporters that Kyle Rittenhouse is, he's a poor victim and stuff like that. It's scary for people who are fighting against the regime, but they're not worried at all. They're purposefully unleashing this on the rest of us, sure that they're going to be just fine.
Let's switch gears and talk about what Republicans are thinking about in regard to stimulus relief for Americans. And it's not looking so good. So, in an effort to protect vulnerable GOP senators, Mitch McConnell is planning to hold a vote on a skinny stimulus bill to basically provide voters with the theatrical and mythical display of conservatives actually doing something for people. But in reality, it just boils down to theatrics, and that's if they can get the bare minimum passed through the stimulus bill. So during a call with Republicans and Steve Mnuchin and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, McConnell made clear that vulnerable lawmakers, GOP lawmakers specifically, would need to vote in favor of this legislation as soon as possible. So again, he's gonna hold this vote next week. That's what his plans are. As one anonymous source told The Hill, McConnell wants it. McConnell said today is that every member who's up for re-election who has any hint of vulnerability wants a bill that gets 51 votes. Okay, so 51 votes, by the way, apparently isn't enough to pass the bill. As The Hill reports, with the legislation, while the legislation would need 60 votes to advance, even a simple majority in favor would be seen as a GOP victory. Republicans are worried their Senate majority is at risk in November because of President Trump's low approval ratings in many battleground states. They also have to defend 23 seats, while Democrats only have to protect 12. So they're panicking. And again, it just kind of goes back to, we don't really care about doing what we need to do to, look out for our constituents, do what's best for the American people. We just want to do what it takes to keep our position of power within the Senate. Now, what happened on the House side? Actually, before I get to the House, John, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, super fast, and I guess it's a bit of a tangent, but I wish that they would identify implied filibusters. I used to hate that during the Obama years when they would just say, yeah, well, of course, every piece of legislation requires 60 votes, as if that's the way the government is supposed to function. I get it, now it's the Democrats with the implied filibuster, but they're right to potentially filibuster this, so I have no problem with it being identified. I think that people need a better idea of how the government actually runs, and the media weirdly obscures it for some reason. But anyway, to the substance of it, yeah, they don't care and they don't need to care. Mitch McConnell is apparently not worried that his base, even in his own reelection, let alone the reelection bids of any number of Republicans in the Senate and the House, is going to be negatively impacted if they do effectively nothing to deal with the fact that so many people have lost their jobs or being evicted or losing everything. I've seen horrific polling about the number of people who can't afford to pay their jobs right now that has been pay their bills when they're unemployed. Those numbers have been going up literally every month as they've allowed the enhanced unemployment to lapse. I assume that the Democrats will try to do something. I guess the question I have for you is, like, we can see what this ploy is about. We're gonna do something that barely does anything but pretends that we care. Will Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, will the leadership support it because, hey, at least it does something, even if it isn't substantive, if it doesn't really fix all the problems? What do you think they're gonna end up doing?
That's such a great question, because and everyone hang in there, because I'm about to give you details on what this skinny stimulus would entail. But apparently there are moderate Democrats, I would argue they're conservative Democrats in the Senate that actually like this proposal from Republicans. Okay, so I don't know what Democratic leadership is gonna do, but what I do know is that it does put the Democratic lawmakers in an awkward position, because you have conservative Democrats who are kind of pulling and pushing Democrats overall in a more right-wing direction. So let me give you the details though on what passed in the House months ago, honestly, and this is something that they can't get through the Senate. So the House Democrats passed a $3.4 trillion coronavirus relief package in May and have repeatedly hit Senate Republicans for not bringing their own bill up for a vote. After an initial $1.1 trillion version was unveiled by Republicans in July, several of the 53 GOP senators who are not up for re-election raised concerns about the price tag. So you have these right wingers who are like, yeah, we don't like the House bill, it's too much. But even the watered down version of $1.1 trillion doesn't do it for them. It's like, oh, yeah, that's too much money to help the American people in the middle of this pandemic when tens of millions of Americans are still unemployed. Okay, now the latest version that the Senate is likely to vote on next week is the skinny stimulus, right? And it's gonna cost about $500 billion to $700 billion. And so the Hill reports that moderate Democrats, especially in the House, are pushing for something like this, and it puts Democratic leaders in an awkward position, said a Senate GOP aide. The aide was one of two who confirmed that legislation is not expected to include another round of the $1,200 direct payments like the ones included in the CARES Act from late March. It would not include significant aid for state and local governments beyond the $105 billion to help colleges and schools resume classes this fall. So it's incredibly watered down, and it just does not provide enough to give people the relief that they need right now. And so, look, so much about politics is about the theater and is about the messaging. So the way that the Senate Republicans are gonna play this is they're gonna vote in favor of it. If it doesn't pass, then they can point at Democrats and be like, look at them. They don't care about you. We're trying to get this stimulus through and they've blocked it. And that's the way you do politics. Now, Nancy Pelosi could have done the exact same thing. It's just that she's not good with messaging. We've seen her on TV. She went on cable news a few times. She did her best. Get AOC on there. Get someone who actually can do decent messaging and hit Republicans where it hurts. No offense, Nancy Pelosi seems super disinterested when she does those interviews.
Yeah. Yeah, and they could certainly do more in terms of the messaging. In terms of, sort of strategically using a bill's failure to advance your political agenda, they have the advantage, the Republicans do in the Senate, that they can put a bill up and then have it voted down. The issue is that the Democrats have had bills for literally months, but the Republicans in the Senate won't allow them to be even raised for a vote. And so, like, hypothetically, they could say, hey, we've got a bill, we want to vote on it, but that's not as strong as being able to say they literally voted it down. The entire thing is so frustrating. Again, like I've been saying a lot recently, we're a failed state. Something like 1 out of 5 Americans lost their jobs. We gave people $1,200, and then maybe in 4 months after that, we think maybe we'll do it again in the biggest failure of our economy and our public health system in our entire lives. That's what we have. That's what the American government has for its people.
Exactly. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, we have more for you guys, including we're going to do an assessment, see if we got enough likes and shares on this stream. And if we do, we're going to take one of your suggestions. I'm going to sing a song. We'll be right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
You guys are rock stars. Everyone who's watching live, our goal today was to get at least 2,000 people to like and share the stream. We got 2,300 people to do it. And as a result, no, 2,500? Did it change? So we're gonna sing a song, and I am going to take Steve's suggestion from our members section and sing "Return of the Mac." The backup singing artist will be Brett Ehrlich because John Iadarola was unwilling to do it. So let's do it.
I want to be part of the audience.
Go ahead. Well, you don't really have a choice there. So here you go. All right. Well, I tried to tell you so.
Yes, I did.
But I guess you didn't know. As I said, the story goes, baby, now I got the flow. 'Cause I knew it from the start. Baby, when you broke my heart, that I had to come again and show you that I'm real. All those times I said that, all those times I said that I love you.
You lied to me.
That's so scary.
I don't know how it goes.
I forgot he was in this.
Get to the chorus.
You lied to me.
All right, to get to the chorus. All right. You do the part in the parentheses, Brett.
Return of the Mac.
Come on.
Return of the Mac.
Oh my God.
You know that I'll be back.
Here I am.
Return of the Mac. I don't know. That's it. We're done. We don't have any time. But I think it.
Anna, 2 stories.
And the album will come out.
I have an update. We're down to 1,500 likes again.
We're at 2,800 now, by the way. That's 300 likes we got through those stylings.
I love it. All right, we unfortunately have to move on and do some more news. But that's what we're paid to do. So let's do it. So, the United States has decided to isolate itself from the global fight for a coronavirus vaccine, with the Trump administration arguing that it doesn't want to be constrained by the World Health Organization and by multilateral groups that are working together. We're talking about hundreds of countries to combat this virus, which doesn't really understand or care about borders. for instance. So the US pulled out of the World Health Organization in early July, and we're already seeing some of the consequences of that. As the Associated Press reports, some nations have worked directly to secure supplies of vaccine, but others are pooling efforts to ensure success against a disease that has no geographical boundaries. More than 150 countries are setting up the COVID-19 Vaccines Global Access Facility, also known as COVAX. So the cooperative effort linked with the World Health Organization would allow nations to take advantage of a portfolio of potential vaccines to ensure their citizens are quickly covered by whichever ones are deemed effective. The World Health Organization says even governments making deals with individual vaccine makers would benefit from joining COVAX because it would provide backup vaccines in case the ones being made through bilateral deals with manufacturers aren't successful. And as Representative Amy Berra says, and she is a medical professional, joining COVAX is a simple measure to guarantee US access to a vaccine, no matter who develops it first. This go-it-alone approach leaves America at risk of not getting a vaccine. And listen, if Donald Trump did a decent job in responding to this pandemic, and we saw the effectiveness of his approach, then maybe there would be a little bit of trust toward what he's doing in pulling out of the World Health Organization. But this country has been honestly a unique failure when you consider the resources we have in responding to this crisis. So let's take a look at Trump's failure gap. That is the difference between the United States and the European Union when it comes to the number of COVID deaths and cases. So as you can see in July, that gap was much, much bigger. But even now, I mean, when you take a look at this, on the August 23rd, numbers, the updates, it shows that the United States is ebbing, but it's still 3 times the second wave experienced by the EU. Like, we've been such failures at this. If you look at the specific numbers in the United States pertaining to the coronavirus, we have 6.09 million confirmed cases, and we already have 185,000 deaths. And if you look at the number of deaths per capita, the United States is pretty high up there in that list. You have Peru, Chile, and Brazil as the top 3. And again, these are deaths per 100,000 people. The United States, though, is 4th. And that does not look good, again, when you consider the wealth and the resources we have in this country and how Donald Trump managed to screw this up so much.
Yeah, and not joining that international compact would be a bad strategy if your goal was to get access to reliable supplies of a safe, tested vaccine when it becomes available and is tested to the extent that multiple countries would feel comfortable giving it to its citizens. If that was your goal, then not joining this would seem to be a bad thing for you. Arguably, they have a different goal. Because I mean, I'm sure many people have seen, we were talking about during one of the breaks, they've already sent out messages from the CDC to state governors telling them to change whatever regulations and rules are necessary to prepare for distribution of a vaccine in late October or by November 1st. Is that because there's been huge advances that we're hearing about, that we're right on the cusp of getting a safe vaccine? No, not at all. But they're getting ready to make a big announcement. And whether the vaccine is safe or was tested, or they actually have a deal to purchase it, or they actually can get the supplies necessary to spread it, that's all an interesting question. But they're definitely going to announce it no matter what.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And they're planning on doing it close to November. I wonder why. All right, well, we have time for one more story, so let's get right to it. It has to do with local politics in California, but it's making national headlines for good reason. So California's legislative session ended in absolute chaos as one Democratic lawmaker who had just given birth a month ago was forced to show up in person to vote, even though she had pleaded with the speaker that she would be allowed to vote by proxy or vote from home. She was denied that ability. And so she had to drive 80 miles with her baby in order to vote on an important housing bill. And as you guys know, homelessness is a huge problem in California. In Los Angeles County alone, 60,000 people are homeless. And so she cared enough to really put herself through a lot to put in this vote. So in the waning moments, Assembly member Buffy Wicks appeared on the floor with her crying 1-month-old daughter, Ellie, after being denied to vote by proxy. We have a video of that moment. Let's take a look.
Wicks, you are recognized.
Colleagues, it's good to see you all. I was actually in the middle of feeding my daughter when this bill came up. And I ran down on the floor today because I strongly believe we need to pass this bill. We are 3.5 million homes shy of where we need to be right now in this state. And Ellie agrees that we absolutely need to pass this bill. And I know it's difficult for some of you. These votes are difficult for some of you. But it's very, very important. And I just come down here in strong support of this bill and urge my colleagues. It's the simplest way we can have density that still adheres to neighborhood character. So please, please, please pass this bill. And I'm going to go finish feeding my daughter. Thank you.
Man, that is incredible video. And she voted, the legislation passed, but it didn't pass in time. So the vote needed to be done by midnight, and unfortunately they didn't meet that due date or that due time, I guess. And as a result, the bill didn't make it. It's such an important bill. And now the speaker is apologizing for making that terrible decision. But I wanted you to jump in, John, because living in California, we experienced this. I mean, we experienced the housing crisis.
Yeah, 100%. And you're definitely right on the substance, and it's unfortunate. In terms of the process that led to this, I mean, there have been so many great instances this year of what if you had seen this happen in another country's government? If you saw a complete inability to do remote voting, not because you can't do it, we're all capable of it, but because half of the political spectrum doesn't want government to function. I mean, it's in California still. DC was crippled by it for so long, an inability to get them in there. And then even once, like the sessions are so short to begin with, like we purposefully do not have a functioning government.
It's crazy. It's crazy. When I was reading about the Senate skinny stimulus proposal that they're likely to vote on next week, there was a little bit in there about how they want to do this vote before they go on recess again. And I'm just like, when are they not on recess? Like, when are they working? When are they like not just hanging out or fundraising? I just don't. Everyone else is expected to work insane hours just to like survive in this country. But when it comes to the people who are supposed to represent us in our best interests, it's like, yeah, let's like do political theater before this session ends and we go on break again. It's disgusting. Yeah. The country is experiencing a crisis. How about no breaks until you guys actually get things done? Anyway.
You would think.
All right, we got 30 seconds. So I'm gonna go ahead and read a few comments from our member section. So Everett says, Anna needs to sing Kiss from a Rose by Seal. Maybe next time. I think we had fun.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Don't lie, you don't like music. Do you even know that song?
I like that song. Yes, I know that song. I like that song. Okay. I know Seal.
I don't believe you. Okay. All right. Well, we have an awesome post game ahead for you guys. Make sure you check that out. Go to tyt.com/join to become a member, where we're going to talk about a woman who got arrested for saying that a cop has a small penis. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.